ITV Evening News with Trevor McDonald.
Velcro, clothes pegs, light bulbs, razors. Hand gloves.
With more Easter eggs at Woolworths than anywhere else, you might forget what you went in for.
I'll get the hot cross buns out in the oven.
Hand gloves.
Don't forget what you went in for.
Right, I know what I'm doing. I'm having a fixed rate endowment. No, I'm not. I'm having a variable rate with cash back. No, I'm not. I'm going down the pub. Abbey National, because life's complicated enough.
With more Easter eggs than anyone else.
Come on, put the back in the it.
Can opener.
You might forget what you went in for. With the buy one, get one free offer on Ladybird t-shirts.
Bath plug.
You might forget what you went in for.
We need a lampshade.
Oh, yeah.
Dave, seen these?
Nice. Look.
Yeah.
Here.
What about over here?
What are you looking at?
That dog. Lampshade.
Oh, yeah.
Don't forget what you went in for.
Tonight on ITV, Parking Wars at 8, Motorway Life at 8:30,
Mr. Chop, well.
and Roger Cook Fugitives at 9 on ITV. This is LWT. Now a broadcast by the Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Tony Blair.
Good evening. I want to explain why what is happening in Kosovo matters. To you, to me, to all of us. I want to explain why I may have to send our forces into action again. And when I do, I want them to go with the whole country, united behind them. There are people who say, don't act. Seek a political solution to Kosovo. Believe me, nobody has tried harder than us. We tried for 6 long months to keep Milosevic to the agreements he made. Those agreements were modest enough to stop killing innocent people and driving them from their homes. Even now, if he stopped, we could talk again. To those who say the aim of military strikes is not clear, I say it is crystal clear. It is to curb Milosevic's ability to wage war on an innocent civilian population. To those who say NATO is striking at a sovereign nation without justification, I say it was Milosevic who scrapped Kosovo's autonomy. 90% of its people are not Serbs. Now they have no rights, no justice, no protection. 250,000 of them homeless. 2,000 killed since last spring. These are our fellow human beings. Husbands taken from wives, fathers taken from children, never to see them again, never knowing if they're dead or alive, as they walk mile upon mile to a safety they may never find. Old women humiliated, young men massacred, just for being Albanian, just for being there when the Serb killing machine arrived. Our fellow human beings. Act or do nothing. Do nothing, and Milosevic will feel free to do as he likes with the civilian population. They will be ground under his heel at the very moment when these poor defenseless people are begging us to show strength and determination. We would have shown unpardonable weakness and dereliction. That is not the tradition of Britain. Yes, of course there are risks. All military action has its risks. But taking action is the only chance justice has got. And Kosovo is part of Europe, a short sea journey from Italy, a short drive from Greece. There, in the Balkans, the First World War began in Sarajevo. 5 years ago in Bosnia, we only just averted war again, started by Milosevic. We stopped it then only by standing up to him. Fail to act now, and the conflict would not stop at the borders of Kosovo. We would have to deal with the consequences of spiraling conflict and hundreds of thousands of refugees. So I wanted to speak to you tonight and tell you very directly why I have authorized British forces to join our NATO allies in these attacks. It will be tough, but now that we have begun, I ask your support in seeing it through. We must act with total resolve to achieve our aims, for the sake of humanity and for the sake of the future safety of our region and the world. I've just been speaking to some of the UK servicemen involved in this operation. I can tell you that the longest hours of any Prime Minister's life are those spent waiting to hear that the crew sent into battle are back safely. Far more agonizing is the wait for their families. They are in our thoughts and prayers tonight. I would never expose our brave servicemen and women to those risks unless I believed that I had to. We are doing what is right for Britain, for Europe, for a world that must know that barbarity cannot be allowed to defeat justice. This is simply the right thing to do.
That was a broadcast by the Prime Minister. You're watching LWT, part of the ITV network.
From ITN, the ITV Evening News with Trevor McDonald.
It's 6:30 on Friday evening. Tonight's headlines. NATO makes its first daylight strikes against Serb targets. The NATO pilot's view of a successful raid. Refugees from Kosovo tell of new atrocities. And hello, old friend. Thatcher greets Pinochet. Good evening. NATO forces launched their first daylight attacks on Yugoslavia today. American warships fired cruise missiles for the first time without the cover of darkness. And this evening, NATO jets are in the air again, carrying out a third major assault on Yugoslav forces. Earlier, NATO said it was satisfied with last night's raids and said there were no Allied casualties. Reports from the Yugoslav side say more than 100 civilians and 30 soldiers have been killed. Our correspondent Julian Manyon is in Belgrade, where Western journalists aren't permitted to take their own pictures of the bomb damage. He's been watching Yugoslav TV pictures.
In the town of Leskovac, 200 miles south of Belgrade, some of the aftermath of a raid by RAF Harriers. Serbian television showed pictures of damage to a civilian area caused, it claimed, by a bomb which missed its target. The RAF says it hit a military ammunition dump near the edge of town with 2 laser-guided bombs, and that the raid was a complete success. Targets all over Serbia have once again been attacked. This morning, flames and smoke were still billowing near the town of Kraljevo, south of the capital. Last night, NATO aircraft were seen in the skies above the town. Their targets included a military airbase and an important Air Force radar system. The town also has a military factory producing parts for tanks and armored cars, but it's not yet clear from the pictures shown by Serbian television whether that was hit. Other airstrikes struck the neighboring Republic of Montenegro, which, along with Serbia, makes up what remains of Yugoslavia. In the Belgrade area, the pattern was repeated, with another cruise missile attack on the Air Force base 15 miles away. And this evening, there are reports of a fresh bombing strike just outside the Serbian capital.
In spite of the tension caused by airstrikes just beyond the city limits, there's no sign so far that the NATO campaign is weakening resolve here in the Serbian capital. In fact, attitudes among ordinary people seem to be hardening, with many saying that Serbia should now stand firm against what they see as blackmail. So whatever the damage to President Milosevic's armed forces, and that is no doubt considerable, the uncomfortable fact is that here inside Serbia, his political position has for the moment strengthened.
It's not yet known what price is being paid by the Yugoslav army. One report speaks of 30 servicemen dead, and television showed one of the wounded being treated. What is clear is that the pressure, and presumably the casualties, will have to considerably increase before President Milosevic changes course. Julian Manyon, ITN, Belgrade.
Julian Manyon joins us now on the telephone from Belgrade. Julian, what's the latest there?
Well, we've just been told by the emergency services here that there is an unconfirmed report of an explosion somewhere on the southern fringes of the city. And as I say, it's unconfirmed, and I've done my best to look in that direction from this hotel, but there's no sign of any fire or any smoke in that direction. What there is as night falls here is an increased sense of nervousness, even fear. The streets are now largely deserted at this time. The street lights have been turned out. People have gone home. Fewer shops are open than there were in the past during the daytime, and virtually none are open now. And people are just sitting at home waiting to see what happens. And there really is a considerable worry, of course, among ordinary people in case a missile or a bomb does strike in the heart of the city. But so far, there is absolutely no report of such a thing taking place.
Julian Manyon in Belgrade, thank you. Serious differences about bombing Yugoslavia began to emerge among NATO countries today. Greece called for an end to the airstrikes, and Italy said negotiations with Yugoslavia should be restarted. Russia made its long-standing anger clear by ordering NATO representatives out of Moscow. Back in London, the Defence Secretary George Robertson repeated the NATO position that the bombing would go on for as long as it takes. Robert Moore reports.
As the RAF today prepared their Harriers for further bombing raids over Yugoslavia, the air assault is still gathering pace. For the first time, NATO's strike aircraft launched a series of daytime attacks, perhaps emboldened by the lack of air defences encountered so far. Not just from the air, US warships also this afternoon fired a salvo of cruise missiles at undisclosed Serb positions. NATO appears determined to steadily intensify the strikes until President Milosevic agrees to the international peace plan on Kosovo. But so far, the military strikes, spectacular in launch, devastating on impact, are failing to alleviate the plight of the Kosovar Albanians. For even as the giant B-52s took to the air from an RAF base in Gloucestershire, reports from NATO suggest the Serb offensive in Kosovo is actually increasing, with ever greater brutality.
There's not going to be one knockout blow, but day after day, if he does not stop his genocidal attacks on the Kosovo people, we will take larger and larger lumps out of his military force. The next move is Milosevic's. At any time, he can choose peace and end the conflict.
The Prime Minister has just delivered his speech to the nation on the Yugoslav crisis. It was a personal explanation of the high stakes involved.
We are doing what is right for Britain, for Europe, for a world that must know that barbarity cannot be allowed to defeat justice. This is simply the right thing to do.
The US and Britain are emphasizing the missile raids will continue until Belgrade agrees to both the peace plan and to NATO troops enforcing it. But the first open NATO dissent emerged today, with Greece calling for an end to the raids and a return to diplomacy. The more intense diplomatic flak is coming from Moscow. President Yeltsin, who is meeting his Prime Minister and military leaders today, has expelled all NATO representatives from Russia and has also promised Yugoslavia humanitarian aid. Robert Moore, ITN.
And our Moscow correspondent Mark Webster has been following Russia's strongly anti-NATO stance. Mark, is there any further evidence of the seriousness of Russian opposition to the bombing?
Yes, I think it might be tempting to dismiss this as just empty rhetoric from a country which is no longer a superpower, but I think it is far more serious than that. I think there's been a debate within the Russian government as to the right way to respond. I think the hawks have won. And that is of concern to all of us, because it means a suspension, at least for now, of lots of areas of collaboration which are important for international security, including nuclear weapons reduction, disposal of old nuclear garbage, and conventional weapons. Now, that, as I say, should concern us all.
The Russians talk, Mark, about helping Yugoslavia. Can they?
Well, because of the appalling state of the Russian economy, they can do far less for Yugoslavia than they would actually like to do. They are sending humanitarian aid. Now, that has an ironic ring to it, because they're about to receive hundreds of millions of dollars in food aid from Europe. It means that in the long term, Russia has got to collaborate again with Europe, but it means an icy time in the immediate future.
Mark Webster in Moscow, thank you. The Ministry of Defence in London released the first pictures today from cameras on RAF Harriers as they dropped bombs over Yugoslavia. They were of the same raid last night, which Serbian television claimed had damaged a residential area. The RAF denies that and says that unlike previous missions, the attack hit its targets. Here's ITN's Kevin Dunn.
Briefing journalists on the RAF's second night of operations, the Chief of the Defence Staff said 6 Harriers had successfully destroyed 2 ammunition storage depots. Cockpit video, with still sensitive information blocked out, showed the impact of the laser-guided bombs.
You can see there, that's a large explosion indicative of a secondary explosion with the weapons inside the storage area now exploding.
There was no mention of casualties in the attacks. In the second, the pilot takes evasive action before hitting the ammunition dump.
Weapons and equipment stored included anti-aircraft guns and ammunition, man-portable surface-to-air missiles, target tracking radars, and large-caliber self-propelled and towed guns.
Video was not shown, however, of the attacks which were aborted. Serbian television later showed what it said was damage caused by the attack, mainly damaged roofs and blown-out windows. At NATO headquarters, cockpit video from American strikes were shown. Again, no estimate of casualties on the ground. In all, 64 Alliance planes attacked more than 50 targets across Yugoslavia. NATO attacks so far have been concentrated on Yugoslavia's integrated air defences, but are now shifting to wider military targets, including headquarters of the Serb Army and Special Police. Kevin Dunn, ITN, at the Ministry of Defence.
Still to come on the ITV Evening News, more of the day's news and sport, including a report from Kosovo's border with Macedonia as tension grows. How Lady Thatcher lavished praise on General Pinochet. And who Kevin Keegan's picked for tomorrow's clash with Poland. All that when we come back.